Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're going way back, like way before Dewey Decimal, to explore the origins of libraries. And get this, we're not talking about ancient Greece or Rome, no sir. We're diving deep into ancient Kemet, what most people call Egypt, our main source. This fascinating paper called The Ancient Kemetic Roots of Library and Information Science really makes you rethink what you thought you knew about, well, the whole history of libraries. He really does challenge a lot of the traditional narratives, doesn't it? Big time. Okay, so before we get all up in those papyrus scrolls, gotta set the scene. This people we're looking at, it's published in the Journal of Pan-African Studies, and it places Kemet very firmly in the context of Black African civilization, which is really important context for sure. Totally. Now, there's been, this ongoing discussion with the race of ancient Egyptians, and we're not going to get into all that right now. But for today's deep dive, we're focusing specifically on what this paper tells us about Kemet's amazing knowledge systems that were in place thousands of years before, the Greeks get all the credit for libraries. Exactly. It's pretty clear from the evidence presented that Kemet had a very sophisticated system of libraries long before the Greeks. Okay, so picture this. You're in ancient Kemet. Those temples everyone's heard about. They weren't just for, worshiping the gods. These were bustling centers of learning, almost like, I don't know, ancient universities, each with its own, seriously impressive library. Yeah. The paper makes it clear that these temple libraries were at the heart of society in Kemet. They housed vast collections of knowledge. We're talking everything from agriculture and astronomy to history, even irrigation techniques, literature, you name it. It really does paint a picture of a civilization that was, deeply committed to knowledge and learning. Oh, absolutely. It's mind-blowing when you think about the scale of it all. They had this place, the iPad seats. It was basically a university. Get this. It had an estimated 80,000 students. 80,000. Imagine the library they needed to support all those students. I mean, can you even imagine the number of scrolls? Right. Now, since we're talking impressive libraries, gotta mention Ramesses II. This pharaoh, he was a total library nerd. Seriously into building these amazing structures. Oh, yeah. He was a prolific builder, for sure. Especially libraries. One of his most famous creations was the Ramesseum, Grand Funerary Temple. Yeah. But also, it housed this incredible library, and the library had this motto, medicine for the soul. What do you make of that? Medicine for the soul. It's a beautiful phrase, isn't it? It really says a lot about how the ancient Kemetics thought about knowledge. I know, right? To them, knowledge wasn't just about, I don't know, practical skills or something. It was about enlightenment. Personal transformation, deep stuff. Exactly. It wasn't just a dispensary of facts. It was a place of healing for the soul. Love that. Okay, so it wasn't just dusty rooms full of scrolls. These libraries, they were designed to be architecturally stunning. Think Abu Simbel, with that crazy design that let the sunlight shine right into the temple. Illuminated the scrolls inside. Such a powerful symbol, shows how much they revered knowledge, how important it was to actually make it accessible. Totally. Now, with all these amazing libraries, you gotta wonder, who was running the show? Well, they had a whole class of, librarian priests. These folks were in charge of maintaining those massive collections of scrolls, the guardians of knowledge, I guess you could say, meticulously preserving and organizing everything. And it's not just a guess, right? I mean, archaeologists have found some pretty cool stuff. There's evidence from the tombs of some of these librarian priests. There was Nebnufra and his son, Nufra-Hetep, father and son librarian team. Oh, how cool is that? Like a family business, but for knowledge. Right. And their titles. Yeah. They were called things like, get this, custodians of unlimited knowledge. Yeah. Or keepers of the scrolls. I mean, how awesome is that? It does have a certain ring to it. And what's fascinating is that the way they categorized all this knowledge, their whole classification system, it was rooted in their mystery system. Remember that? Yeah. The elements, duality, all that. Right. It was this complex system of thought that categorized knowledge based on those elements. Fire, water, earth, and air. But also processes and the duality of opposites. It all played a role. So wait, they weren't just randomly shoving scrolls into jars. There was a real system to how they kept everything organized. Absolutely. Their approach to, cataloging and organizing all these collections was incredibly sophisticated. Using those elements, processes, this whole concept of duality to make sure that everything had its proper place. It's wild, isn't it? We think of libraries and we think Dewey Decimal, right? Mobile Dewey, he was the revolutionary, right? But it sounds like the Kemetics were on to something similar, centuries earlier. It really is remarkable. It makes you wonder, If their libraries were that advanced, why don't we know more about them? Why is it always about Greece and the Library of Alexandria, you know? That's a great question. And it's something this paper really digs into, the idea that maybe, just maybe, the way history is usually told, that whole Eurocentric view, it's kind of overlooked or, I don't know, downplayed the contributions of other cultures. Yeah. Especially African cultures. Yeah, there's definitely been a tendency to, present the Greeks as the originators of libraries, while kind of ignoring all the evidence that Kemet had these really sophisticated library traditions, like way earlier. It was not just an oversight, it's more like intentional erasure. The paper argues that it's a pattern, a way of telling history that prioritizes Western achievements and downplays others. And tragically, the destruction and looting of all those Kemetic libraries over the centuries has contributed to that erasure. It's heartbreaking when you think about all the knowledge that was lost. It really is. It just makes you wonder, if Kemet had these incredibly advanced knowledge systems thousands of years ago, what else might be out there? What other innovations and insights are just waiting to be rediscovered? That's a thought-provoking question. Like, if we've been getting this story wrong for so long, what else have we missed? What can we learn from Kemet's example? So many questions. We'll keep digging into them as we continue to explore this fascinating paper. Makes you wonder, what treasures of knowledge might have been lost over the centuries. Look, there's a whole chapter missing from the library story. But okay, back to this paper. I was blown away by how much detail there is about how the whole system worked in Kemet. Like, they even had a whole system for classifying and, cataloging all those scrolls. Oh, yeah, you know how we talked about that mystery system with the elements and everything? They applied those same principles to their cataloging, like using elements and processes, that concept of duality, to keep their collections organized. So it wasn't just a big jumbo of scrolls. They could actually, find things again. Exactly. They had ways to keep track of it all. The paper mentions some papyrus scrolls were labeled and stored in, get this, clay jars? Or even, metal cylinders for safekeeping. Wow, high-tech. And they had parchment scrolls, too. A lot of them organized by author, title, or subject. So really not that different from how we do it now. Pretty amazing when you think about it. Right, we think Dewey Decimal System, that was revolutionary. Novo Dewey, he was the guy, right? Mm. But the Kemetics were doing something similar way before him. Centuries earlier, and think about it, Dewey himself, he studied all those earlier classification systems, like the ones Aristotle used. And it's totally possible that those systems were, influenced by Kemetic thought. Whoa, full circle. So, okay, we got libraries, librarians, classification system, we've even got a cataloging system. What else? Did they have, ancient bookcases? Maybe not bookcases exactly, but they did have chests, specially designed boxes, to hold and protect all their scrolls. Okay, so maybe not, IKEA style, but so, yeah, it shows how important it was to them, preserving and organizing all that knowledge. But here's what I don't get. If Kemet was, this library and information science superpower, why don't we hear more about it? In school, we all learned about Aristotle and the Library of Alexandria, but these incredible Kemetic libraries, nothing. Yeah, it's a good question. And the paper kind of suggests this wasn't just an accident, that there's this pattern of Eurocentrism in how we tell history. Yeah. Focusing on Western contributions and downplaying, maybe even erasing what other cultures achieved, especially African cultures. It's almost like intellectual colonialism, in a way. Right. The paper calls out some major encyclopedias, World Book, for spreading this misinformation. They'll say there was a lack of public library services in Africa, but they don't give any historical context. No acknowledgement of, all the rich library traditions on the continent. So they're basically presenting a totally skewed version of history. And that kind of storytelling, it has consequences. It shapes how people see Africa, undermines all those achievements of African civilizations. And it keeps this myth alive that Africa has no real intellectual heritage. Which is just so wrong. Yeah. So what do? How do we change the narrative? How do we give Kemet, its rightful place in the library and information science story? Well, the paper proposes, an African-centered corrective paradigm. Basically, we need to challenge those Eurocentric biases, especially in library education. We need to incorporate this knowledge into how we teach African history and create networks of, Afrocentric libraries and information centers. And reclaiming that history, celebrating those achievements. And it's not just about the past. This knowledge can change how we think about libraries today, how we think about access to information. It reminds us how important it is to preserve cultural heritage for ourselves and for future generations. Oh, it's all connected, Rick. This deep dive, it's just scratched the surface. There's so much more to discover. The paper mentions the Kushite Royal Library. Discovered in 1655, it had over 10,000 volumes of ancient writings. 10,000 volumes. Whoa. What stories do you think those scrolls could tell? And what about, the legacy of Kemetic knowledge in other African cultures? Like, there are the Timbuktu manuscripts. Some scholars think they might actually contain knowledge that came from ancient Kemet. That would be amazing. It really highlights how much more there is to learn about, the connections between different African cultures and traditions. It's like a puzzle, and we're just starting to find the edge pieces. And the most important thing is we're asking the right questions now, challenging those assumptions that have been holding us back for so long. That's what I love about these deep dives. It's not just about, learning facts. It's about broadening our perspective, questioning what we thought we knew. It's about reclaiming our intellectual heritage and recognizing the contributions of all cultures to human knowledge. Yeah, it really is a journey, isn't it? Like, this whole deep dive, it's given us a peek into this whole other world of knowledge. Makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden away, just waiting for us to find it. I know, right? And it's so inspiring to think about what we can learn from these ancient cultures like Kemet. Their whole approach to knowledge, how they managed it all, so sophisticated, really shows how ingenious they were, and their understanding of the power of information. Wow. It's a powerful reminder that innovation, it can come from anywhere, anytime. It's not just a modern thing. There's so much wisdom in the past if we just, take the time to look for it. Absolutely. And speaking of wisdom, one of the things that really stuck with me from this paper was that whole idea of medicine for the soul. It's not just about, cramming your head with facts, right? It's about using knowledge to better yourself, to connect to, something bigger. That's a really interesting point. It does suggest a more holistic way of thinking about knowledge, doesn't it? One that sees its potential for, personal growth, transformation. It's not just what you know, it's how you use what you know to, live a better life. It really makes you think about how we approach education today. Are we too focused on just memorizing facts and figures, and not enough on actually developing wisdom, real understanding? That's a great question. Maybe there's something we can learn from the ancient Kemetics, from how much they revered knowledge. To them, it was a source of enlightenment, a way to grow as a person. Yeah, and maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. It's not just about, the cool details of ancient libraries or how their systems worked, all the technical stuff. It's about rediscovering this whole other way of thinking about knowledge, one that values wisdom and understanding just as much as the information itself. And always remembering that there's always more to learn, more to discover, and more to question. So as we wrap up this journey into ancient Kemet, I want to leave you with this. What if we all approached knowledge with that same sense of reverence, that same thirst for understanding that those librarian priests had? What kind of world could we create? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep sharing what we find. Until next time, stay curious.